Welcome to the David Richert Gallery. We're here with Gloria Klein and an exhibition of her work behind us. We're also joined by Clark Richert and Vivien Collins today. My name is Rachel Beaudoin. I'm the cataloger of Gloria's work. And I'm just going to give you a little introduction to her system and what we're going to be talking about today. Beginning in the 1970s, Klein developed a numeric system by which she could methodically divide up her compositions, organizing complex patterns, and distributing predetermined colors. Her earliest pattern paintings derive from her experimentation with marking on graph paper. Composed of small, discrete hatch marks in varying colors layered over solid ground, the resulting works resemble woven textiles. She experimented with different possibilities that the mathematical system, angular markings, and color combinations afforded her, varying the hatch marks in length, investigating the compositional potential of her system, and exploring color palettes and their interactions within them. Her work later evolved to include squares, bars of color, cruciform, and combinations of these different elements. The complex and intricate surfaces are a result of a disciplined and labor-intensive process, yet are simultaneously intuitive and playful. In her working process, Klein has asked, how much intensity can be contained? How much madness structured? Klein's balanced color distribution creates an overall sense of unity, captivating and consuming the viewer into the surface. The patterns continually shift, emerge, and recede, requiring the viewer to spend time with the work, investigating the all-over composition thoughtfully. The repetitive patterns of both contrasting and subtle color harmonies and the superimposition of pattern over pattern over pattern creates tension on the surface of the canvas. The resulting compositions encapsulate and explore the relationships between numerous juxtapositions, order and chaos, arrangement and disarrangement, chance and intent, reason and passion, emotion and logic. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the period which we are here today to discuss, Klein was involved in a network of artists working with systemic patterning and decorative motifs. She was an active participant in the Criss-Cross Art Collective, which included artists Clark Richert, Charles DeJulio, Richard Calwait, Fred Worden, George Woodman, among others, and was often featured in their avant-garde art publication, Criss-Cross Art Communications, as we see here. She exhibited at numerous galleries and alternative art spaces, such as the interdisciplinary 112 workshop and the first all-female co-op gallery, AIR. Additionally, Klein curated shows of other artists working with systems, such as in Gallery 128, and she also curated and coordinated the exhibition 10 Downtown, 10 Years, held at MoMA PS1, with an essay written by Lawrence Alloway. Her work takes up many of the same issues as the pattern and decoration movement, a history that's often left out of art historical surveys of the 20th century. Yet, it is very radical in its challenge of traditional modern discourse and the presumptions and hierarchies of art versus craft, East versus West, men's work versus women's work, inclusion versus expansion. In 1977, Klein was included in John Perrault's pattern painting exhibition at MoMA PS1, which included many of the key exponents of the pattern and decoration movement, such as Miriam Shapiro, Joyce Kozloff, Valerie Beaudoin, Robert Kushner, Kim McConnell, and Robert Zakanich, among others. These artists all confronted the ways in which decoration and ornament have been explicitly gendered and denigrated in the Western tradition, looking carefully at wallpaper designs, textile patterns, and rug compositions, media that throughout history has been charged with domestic, feminine, and low art. Thus, they impacted the way that future generations could borrow from craft and women's cultural contributions, no longer fearing to label their work decorative. This evening, we're going to hear from Gloria about the system she devised and employed in her process-oriented production, and how this related to the different issues being explored in systemic and decorative patterning in the 1970s and 80s. We're also joined by Clark and Vivien, two artists whose work and histories also intersect with Gloria's. Clark Richert is one of the founding members of Criss-Cross Art Collective in Boulder, Colorado, which became affiliated with pattern and decoration, and of which Gloria took part. Richert's art practice engages similar issues of geometry, systems, patterns, and abstraction. He currently lives and works in Denver, Colorado, where he's also a professor in the painting program at Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. Vivien Collins is an artist based in New York who became friends with Gloria in the 1980s over their shared passion for geometric art. Collins's constructions and assemblages also intersected with the pattern and decoration movement. Collins now focuses primarily on sculpture, including a recent installation of an 18-foot aluminum and plexiglass work at the Carey Hill Sculpture Park and a 16-foot tall painted aluminum commission in progress for New Orleans. So we're gonna start by, maybe you could tell everybody a little bit about how you became involved with your system, how it developed, and what exactly it involved.
Well, it first began when I was out in East Hampton, in the Hamptons, in New York City, on Long Island. I was feeling uncomfortable being with a group of people that I didn't know very well. And I had graph paper and I decided to do something. And all I can think of, or not even think, just automatically make marks. And that's how, and I had different colored pencils. And that's how it evolved, slowly but surely. And then, I don't know at what point I started making paintings, colorful paintings. And then, in order to do that, I had to think of a way to distribute the colors and how to measure to keep it so it's uniform. The idea was to have unity. So I thought the width of the painting would, and the length of the painting would determine the factors, numbers that I would use. Like my paintings were mostly 60 by 60, and I used factors of 60, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 times 60 is 60, 2 times 30 is 30, 4 times, no, not 4. 2 times 30, 3 times
20.
Thank you very much for the answer. My mouth is getting dry, so I can't think. And 4 times 15, and what's the next one, 10?
6 times 6.
6 times 2.
Yeah.
Come on, people. Participate. This is a class. And then I had 12. 5 times 12 is 60.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then 15 is 4.
That's it.
Did I do that
Did them
one?
all. Yeah.
I did them all.
That was good.
Good. And that's it.
So what was the first thing you did when you would,
Which one?
any
I
of,
can't remember which one.
any of these 3, for example, are the works that are your earlier hatch marks, right? So each of the, there's a grid for them and they're
That-
1 inch.
This would probably be, and that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are the earliest.
Those 3 are the earliest.
Yeah. So how did the process, can you explain the process of, because it's a pretty intricate and detailed,
Okay.
labor-intensive process.
First
that you-
goes the grid on the canvas. After I have gessoed the canvas. And then I would put in tape going diagonally as you see it. That's how I went across. No, the other way. I would put it from the upper right corner down to the lower left corner, the tape. And all the inches would be covered up. I would put a paint over it, a color background. And sometimes this background here was a combination of the colors I would use to color the diagonal marks. But except for the yellow, I would use contrasting colors or just mixture of white and black sometimes. And that's how the process went. And I would also use the pure colors. And I would distribute the colors. Let me see. Over there, there's 4 times 15. The yellow going down the bars.
Mhm.
And it would be the same thing with the spring painting. I have blues. That's 2 times, be 50, well, it's 3 squares,
Mhm.
whatever. So it's 3 20s.
Yeah.
And then vertical, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but on the ends would be broken up, would be shared.
So did you start, for example, so on a work like this, did you start with those blues to create that first pattern, and then?
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah.
Because if you look on the top, you see the blue
Yeah.
above the orange, yellow.
Mhm.
And go down, and then on the top you have blue going across.
Yeah.
So, and then I would proceed doing the next color and go on and on. But each one would be assigned a factor of 60. And then some other color would take a different multiplication.
Yeah.
So, any questions so far?
So it was pretty ordered, right? It was a pretty ordered,
very ordered.
And logical.
My life was not ordered. So this was the way to be sane,
Yeah.
even though it looks insane.
And did you sketch this out before you put it on canvas? You just did it right on the canvas?
Yes,
Yes, what?
absolutely.
Yes, you sketched it first?
No.
You did
Yes,
it right
I-
on the canvas.
Right away, right away.
Yeah. So it was pretty ordered, but then you've also talked about how there were certain elements that maybe you left to the end that were,
I just fill in the color.
yeah, that was,
That related to the area where that was blank, and I would see what color was dominant, and then I would put that color
yeah.
to be part of the pattern.
So there was an element of
Surprise.
intuitiveness, right? And of surprise and changing of the pattern, right?
Yes.
Of shifting outside of that
But it
logical
blends
order.
in because, you know,
Mhm.
in populations you have different kinds of people, and maybe in one neighborhood you have a cluster of population A, and then you would have B, and then there might be someone from population C with A. But it's okay, but it blends in because of the background. The background would be a mix of the colors I'd use for the diagonal lines. So here, this is yellow, orange, maybe blue, gray or white. I don't remember. But just looking at it, you can tell that the background is not a primary color. It's not a pure color. It's a mix. And then I would, the red, which is part of the background, and then the yellow is probably part of it too. And I would just assign the large numbers first, you know, like 30 or 20, 15, till it got smaller and smaller. And then I would, there'd be a column going diagonally across, down, repeatedly across and down. I would use a lot of the colors, of one color. And I would fill it up that way so you can see the diagonal movement, not only horizontally and vertically, but diagonally, going from right to left and left to right. And then also up and down, I would have columns, and I would fill in the columns so that it would be emphasized. So that's how it was. And then eventually I went to maybe something like that, using, that's not example, but I would use some squares, solid squares, but it would be, again, multiples of 10, 5, what else? The other numbers I mentioned before. And then I would have, columns, verticals. And then you have the grid-like thing. It's also 5s and 5s. And it would be separated 5 by 5.
So there's different kinds of patterns. There's patterns that are going vertically, horizontally, and diagonally.
Yeah, both ways.
Excuse me, are you talking, when you talk about these numbers, are you talking about them in terms of the number of hatch marks or the inches?
Hatch marks within the inches.
With hatch marks per inch?
Well, if I have 5 hatch marks, then it's 5 inches. Of course, each square is an inch. Okay, thank you. So that's a good clarification.
So what was the intended experience for the viewer to, this is something I know we've talked a lot about, so there's so many different layers of patterns, right? So many different types of patterns
Right.
that are going on in all of these different
Shifting.
directions.
Right, if you put the painting down, you can imagine it going up. But first maybe the ones, and then going higher up.
So there's a depth to these
Yeah.
paintings as well.
I see so.
Mhm.
I hope if it's not there, I imagine
No, I think so as well. And I think that one of the most wonderful things about it is the way that these patterns emerge and recede and shift as you're looking at them.
Yeah.
And it takes time to see certain ones. You
Right.
will maybe immediately notice, and everyone might actually notice different patterns first, but maybe the yellow diagonals that are going in both directions, positively and negatively.
it. But that's obvious.
Yeah, but then maybe the blues will start to come up, or the orange, vertical and horizontals.
Blue down here.
Yeah, the blues there as well.
Down here.
Right, and then something I just noticed actually this time was there's an orange bar going, cutting it directly, diagonally as well.
The accumulation of orange. Yes, right here.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was the intention then for your viewers to spend a decent amount of time with these canvases, with these works.
Yeah, that's like life. You know, you have problems and there's layers and layers of it, and you have to see each thing as part of it. And it takes time to figure out the problem or the situation or the environment.
Yeah.
So that's how it evolved.
So do you see these works as a problematic in some sort of way, as problematizing, or?
Well, it was a problem, but it got solved, hopefully. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah, so you mentioned different communities, right? You said maybe community A, community B, these different colors. So is each hatch mark? I think that's a really interesting way of talking about it.
Is an individual.
Is an individual.
And you talked about populations.
What's that?
Populations.
Populations, yes.
So is that what when you were making when you were making these paintings, did you see them each as individual entities and then working together
They
as a
have to
collective?
be so that they're integrated.
Mm-hmm.
They form another layer, another color going across. It's
Yeah.
like you see the background color and then something comes out towards you.
And population, you're thinking the number of hashtags in each of the communities?
Yes,
Okay.
Hash marks.
it's like I live in, my population, where I live in Chinatown, New York City, they're hatch marks. I say hello to hatch mark number 1, 2. I don't know, I live in a very big complex and I don't know all the names, but we know each other well enough to say hello, how are you?
And you function together as one,
Yes,
as one unity, as one
And we
complex,
have
right?
all kinds of populations there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I regard it.
When did that emerge? That thinking about these
Population?
Well,
Now.
well, thinking about your works as these different environments.
Environments, well, it is. If you look at the panel, you see a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a quiet environment.
You had a question over here?
Yeah, how did you get the marks all
So
such
clean.
a uniform
Oh, I
size?
well, I put tape on, and then I put polymer over it, and then I put color. Then I take, when it dries, then I take off the tape, the hatch marks. And then when I put the color within the diagonal, it'll be white because the gesso background would be there. And then I would put tape around it and then put more gesso, not gesso, I forgot the word already.
Polymer.
Polymer, thank you. It's good to have more people around.
Wow.
It's a lot of work.
They didn't have,
A lot of
they
tape.
didn't have painters.
A lot, yes, and I
tape.
almost fell because I was stuck in so much. It's true.
Because someone asked today if you had used a stencil, and I said no, it was all by
No,
tape.
Roy Lichtenstein did, but I didn't,
Yeah.
because I wasn't as rich as he was.
What's the sign?
What's
He
that?
knew you didn't. He wrote a letter of recommendation for you.
I needed to go to Hunter College. I wanted to study art, and they said because of my age, not now, but way back, I was not like a regular college-age person. They said, well, if you want to attend, you have to take undergraduate work, and you have to bring us a stack of, not really a stack, but, you know, letters of recommendations from very famous artists. So I did. And I knew Roy Lichtenstein's sister-in-law at the time, and she invited her sister to come see my work, because he wouldn't come. He's a man. So she told him it was good, and that was it.
He trusted.
And I got the letter, and I got letters from Pearl Fine, William King, and I thought 3 was enough. Of course, they were so famous, their resume was a stack, and that was the end of that. And I got in, had a lot of fun, and most of my professors were involved with concept systems, and I enjoyed that tremendously, and it was really up my alley.
Was one of your professors Robert Swain?
Yes.
And by the way, when you listen to artists, the Criss-Cross artists, there's two names I wish you would have had on the list.
Tell me, please.
One of them I cannot pronounce. One is Robert Swain, who shows at this gallery,
Yes.
and another is Mario Yasari.
You're sorry, Mario, you're sorry.
So those were both Criss-Cross artists
Yeah.
who happened to show at this gallery.
Yeah. So do you want to speak a little bit about Crisscross and a little bit about what the idea was, how it developed, how you got involved with Gloria?
Yeah, a little bit. But first I want to say that to the Facebook audience, enjoy this work. It looks great, but I wish you could see it in person. So when I walked in here today, there was like a breath of fresh air. I thought, oh my God, this looks good. This looks really good. I hate to say better than I remember, because I remember it for sure. But it looks really good.
Excuse me, which means that it was shown in inadequate spaces.
Yes, you're probably right.
Well, you know, the typical Criss-Cross exhibition area wasn't a nice, clean, crisp, white cube. So, but I do remember when I first saw my first Gloria painting, and when I walked in and saw it, it resonated with my sense of what art should be.
Thank you.
And it was new information for me, but it was almost as if it's something I've always known. So in my mind, I found a similarity between these paintings and the work of the composer slash musician Philip Glass, who had a very high opinion. I mean, I just attended a concert of his around the same time. So this type of information was buzzing in my brain. And for Philip Glass, it was tight structural rhythms, and that's what Gloria's work was too. And I like your idea that these hatch marks stand for people. And I think it works with my idea that these paintings are a picture of the structure of reality and the structure of space.
Yes.
So, and then after seeing this work the first time, I was, basically overwhelmed by, as I was today. This today, by the way, was new information. I've seen all these paintings before, but this is new information, as if I've known it before, which I have. And at that show that was curated by Gloria, there were, I have a bad memory too, were 2 or 3 other of the Criss-Cross members. And we immediately agreed between us that Gloria should be a Criss-Cross artist. So we asked if Gloria if she was willing to show with us, and she agreed. And so she became a key Criss-Cross artist.
Thanks.
So Criss-Cross was a group of artists that had actually initially started in Boulder, Colorado. There were 4 of us, and we had all been at an artist community in southern Colorado called Drop City. And Drop City was highly informed and influenced by the structural work of Buckminster Fuller, who's the man who designed, among other things, he designed the geodesic dome. if you live in a geodesic dome, you start seeing patterns. So the people that live in geodesic domes really get to see the patterns of his design. And so the four of us actually left Trinidad, Colorado, near Trinidad, Colorado, which is where Drop City was, and we all looked around Boulder, where we had all moved, and we noticed that we were all living in Boulder. So we thought that we should start having meetings. So we decided to start having meetings. Then we decided to name the group, and we couldn't figure out what to name it, but we thought that what we were vectors moving through space. So you can imagine a line moving through space, and another one, all these vectors moving through space, coming into close proximity, and then moving on, which is what happened. We came into close proximity, and then we moved on, some of us dying. So some of the crisscrossers are no longer around.
Two of them.
Two of the main crisscrossers are no longer around. One of the main ones was Charlie DeGiulio, and I noticed Gloria was looking at this cover, and we noticed the Charlie DeGiulio painting. And the other one that was the tragic death of George Woodman. And George Woodman was actually the reason I moved to Colorado. I had a very high opinion of his work, and that's the reason I went there to school. But he wasn't as famous as his wife, Betty Woodman. So some of you might know who Betty Woodman is. But so Crisscross talked about, and you were mentioning Amy Golden. So we were talking about Amy Golden, who talked about pattern, and we were trying, and we kind of, and we've been working with the structures out of Buckminster-Fuller and other geometries, and we kind of formulated a group project, and that group project was to do pattern painting. So each in our different ways set out to do pattern painting. And so we started having exhibitions, and the exhibitions were typically in New York or New York or Colorado, or in Wyoming. We had a great show at the Yellowstone Art Center, which sounds like it's out in the middle of nowhere, but strangely enough, there's a lot of cowboys in Wyoming that happen to like contemporary art. Mystified me. And our last show, actually our last big organized show, was in Mexico City. Oh, and we published this magazine, which was distributed nationally, much more distributed in New York and California than in Colorado. For some reason, the people of Colorado just didn't subscribe very much.
So what I think is really interesting is, like, oh, do you have a question?
Oh, I was just going to ask when your last group show was, and at the height of your group, how many people, what was the highest number of people you had in the group?
Well, we had kind of concentric circles of our organization. So there was the original four people, and the original four were the editors of this magazine. But right in close around the original four were people like Gloria and George Woodman. So they were very key people, important to the group. And then around that were more people. Some of them pattern or structural, like Mario, were pattern or structural artists. And some of them other types of artists, like we were very much interested in the film making of Bruce Conner, who was a California artist.
So what I think is so interesting is the way in which Crisscross is one function, and some of the other independently run or co-op galleries that you were a part of are these alternative art spaces. They were outside of this commercial gallery museum, this established mode for distributing art at this time, and then really created this network of artists that you participated with and met one another through them, right? So even through 112 workshop, which you worked with, and then Crisscross meeting that way. And just wondering about what the experience of that was, because I think that's a really remarkable thing to have established for yourself. And you as well, with Assembled Propositions, your group with Ed Michikowski, how it was these alternative art networks that you developed, what that experience was like.
Me?
All of you. Or none of you.
Excuse me.
Well, you were all part of them in different ways and overlap.
I wasn't showing very much, and I thought the only way I could show was to curate a show. So I invited artists who painted like me, and we had some nice shows. Got some reviews, some people sold work, and then I think I must have done about 4 at Gallery 128 in New York City on the Lower East Side. And it's still there. It functions as an artist-run gallery. A woman named Kazuko Miyamoto had the space as her studio, and she had fabricated Saul LeWitt's work in that space. And so she used the front part as a space for other artists, and it kept getting bigger and bigger because Saul LeWitt was producing less work. And now she has a partner who has helped her to renovate it, and it's sparkling, beautifully clean space. So artist galleries are important to promote artists.
And some of the Criss-Cross arts were in that show that you're talking about with the Saul LeWitt in the background. And I remember thinking that, Saul LeWitt was dead at the time.
I don't know.
But I remember thinking at the time, perhaps this is the last Saul LeWitt.
So that's a stance of activism, though, on your part in terms of going out there and deciding, oh, well, I'm not showing where this gallery didn't accept my work, so I'm going to curate my own show. I'm going to force this change of this distribution pattern by putting myself into it. That's a very active stance rather than, there's a history of artists feeling like frustrated and disgruntled with, and the abstract expressionists at first too, like we're not getting the kind of recognition that we deserve to be in these museums, but they kind of waited around for those museums then to get to them. But instead, I think that Crisscross and through curating shows like this, you pushed yourself forward.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really...
You had to do something to get recognized.
Yeah.
Or to be seen. Because if you don't say something, you might as well stop painting or sculpting.
The first Criss-Cross show in New York was not in a gallery that invited us to show there.
Oh, that's right.
But we actually rented the loft
Oh, okay.
and walked around spreading the word around. We got the word around, and what really surprised me is that all the big name gallery people came to our show.
Wow.
So, and then Peter Frank, who was fairly much paying attention to what was happening in pattern and decoration art, wrote an article about our first show in the Village Voice.
Yeah.
And I always felt kind of slightly exasperated that he wrote not about pattern and decoration for that article, but gallery guerrillaizing, as he called it. So we had our first recognition in the New York media was the fact that we rented our own space and put on the show there.
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful thing to have done. I think it's kind of similar to the 10 Downtown that you were a part of. You want to explain it, or?
Sure. Before I participated in 10 Downtown, 10 artists got together and decided to open their studio to the public, and people were welcome to come visit it. I don't know, maybe it was 4 weekends or something like that, a short period of time. And when that show was over, the 10 artists would then choose 10 more artists, and it would continue that way until the 10th year when they decided not to do it anymore. Because I guess people were busy doing other things. They didn't need to have their studios open to the public. So then, after that, I decided, well, maybe I should do something about it. So I organized a 10 downtown, 10 years. And then the show was at Swain in New York City, which is now part of MoMA. And it was very successful, and Lawrence Alloway wrote an essay. We had a magazine published largely of this, but it was very nice. You could see everybody's work. So I guess I was involved in a lot of art activities,
Yeah.
artist activities.
The great thing about 10 Downtown, I think, is the way that it established this artist network, it gave the artist networks were there, but it really showed the public that these artist networks existed because it was pretty much all in Soho, right?
Yeah.
So every year it was these different artists in Soho. And then you'd walk from, they kind of had a map on the different.
And when did that start? 10?
1968 was the first year of 10
Okay.
Downtown.
I'm glad you know that, because
Yeah.
I forgot.
You were in it in 75 too.
Yes.
Yeah, and it started actually with 10 men. The first 2 years were all men, split pretty much between sculpture and painting. There's 5 painters and 5 sculptors the first year, if I'm correct, and 2 women by the third show, and then by the 6th show, 7 women and 3 men. So this kind of the trend of feminism was catching on in 10 Downtown as well. But this sense of that art isn't being created in this isolated environment, and that you can go into the studios of these people, right?
Yeah.
So you're all connected, but then at the same time, it's 10 solo shows that are going on, right? And the focus is on you when you're in your studio. And I think that also that break of making a studio a gallery was really important for that as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
but sometimes it was unpleasant, like somebody would come and take over and talk about the art. That was my experience.
Yeah.
And I would say, no, it's da-da-da. And the
One
guy won.
aspect of the so-called P&D movement, P&D stands for pattern and decoration. One aspect of that movement is that I think there were more women in the movement than men. So that was an early example of women manifesting in the art world.
Yeah, well, women organizing. It was the first art movement that started with women and not just men, but then included women. It started with, I think, an equal number, but women participated. I mean, it was included women, but it also included women's work and this idea of the domestic, this idea of the interior, and decoration and pattern have been throughout the discourse of modern art have been seen in a certain light and seen as lesser to this rational logic of high art, and I think that was very important for it as well. But yeah, so maybe we should talk a little bit about the relationship and the difference, kind of where your work intersected, both of you intersected with pattern and decoration, and where it diverged, because there was 2 different sects. John Perrault says that there was a sect of pattern and decoration that was the geometric, and then there was the organic and floral imagery, right? So a lot of them were patterns, not all, but a lot of it was pattern, but some were geometric, like both of your work, actually. And then he splits that into the emotional versus the logic, right? The organic floral imagery being emotional, and the geometric and structured work being logical, rational, and less emotional somehow. But I think that your work, Gloria, actually bridges the gap. This spans the space between the two. It includes emotion, expression of self, and of ideas and philosophy about the world, as you were
As
saying.
I said before, that
Yeah.
it calmed me down a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, there was.
Life was tough at the time I was growing up.
Yeah, it was a meditative, cathartic experience for you to create
Yeah.
these, right? And that's imparted into your paintings,
Right,
right?
but they're beautiful.
But they are
In
beautiful.
spite of it.
That relates a little bit to a quote. This is a quote from Gloria from Loa Dabor. Is that the way you
From
pronounce
who?
it? You quoted Loa Dabor, and I like the quote.
I don't think
I got that from you.
okay.
This is 50 years ago, 40 years
Oh.
ago. But I like it. It's geometry represents an expression of the order of the universe as a visual representation of the truth.
Okay, I did tell you that.
Yeah.
I agree with it. Still, it's true, because I like geometry, it's so beautiful when it's assigned a color.
Yeah.
It's magical.
So the
No.
so the geometry of and kind of the patterning of your work it relates in a sense to minimalism, right? Which uses the grid,
Yeah.
but uses the grid as the end product rather than as like the substructure of
Right.
your work. And I think
I use it as a springboard.
yeah, it's a springboard for, and then you add. It's very vibrant. It's exuberant. It's
Yeah.
joyful.
Adding information.
Adding information to it and filling it with a lot of color, right? Because minimalism has these very subdued tones and is really working with.
Yes.
Um,
Talking about color, the thing is that in order to work, you have to have an understanding of how color works. And I think I was trained very early in life because my father would use me as a tester. He was a painter, house painter, and he needed to match color to wallpapers. This is going way back, decades, 60, 70 years ago. And he would mix paint because he knew the shades, but he didn't know the color. So I would tell him and it was okay. So I think I became sensitized then.
sensitized to color, but also it's interesting that it was matching it to wallpaper because there's a decorative.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, well, there's a decorative element.
Do you remember what any of those wallpapers looked like?
No, floral. There were flowers. That was a big thing.
Yeah.
Because we had flowers too on our walls. Yeah. Did anyone else have flowered wallpaper? You did? I thought they were beautiful. Nice colors too.
One thing about, speaking of the emotional versus the rational, one thing that is interesting about, as far as I can tell, most of the Criss-Cross artists, is they have their roots in abstract expressionism. Like Gloria, in a way, you have your roots in abstract expressionism.
Right. Franz Klein.
Specifically the work of Franz Klein.
Right. I loved it.
And you liked Franz Klein's diagonals, is that right?
Yes.
It's kind of like his diagonals found
Yeah.
their way into your diagonals, which found their way into your diagonal hatchmark structure.
Yes. Because when I first saw his work, I went crazy. I had to leave the room because there was this power, striking across his canvas, and I thought, wow. But I didn't say I must go home and do a hatch mark. No, it took time. But I did do some Franz Klein paintings, not large ones like his. He had used factory-sized paintbrushes to create his large canvases. And I think it's like writing the hatch marks. You have a stroke and then you put a little arc, you have an R. There's things like that. So, yes, I fell in love with Franz Klein. Not that we have the same sounding name, but it's just.
And what did people call you?
He called me
No, people called you, didn't they call you
Franz Klein.
Francis
Francis
Klein?
Klein. It's true.
I never heard that. I never heard that.
And one thing I think that your work retained from the abstract expression is the size, is the scale of the work. They're really quite massive.
Yes.
And we were talking yesterday when we were looking at your work about the way that the height of your work actually relates to your height, right? So there's this
Yes.
bodily relationship between your body and between the canvas, and then between the hatch marks in your hand, right? So it's on a general and a specific and a
Yeah.
personal sense as well.
When I first started using hatch marks, I didn't do this size.
Mm-hmm.
I did small sizes, vertical painting,
Yeah.
30 by 60. But when I did large ones, the factors of 60, I wasn't 60 inches tall, I was 4'10" and a half, something like that. very little.
Well, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah,
But this is not exactly a deep, serious idea, but maybe it is. I call Gloria the Vitruvian woman.
true what?
Vitruvian woman. You know the Vitruvian man?
No.
The Vitruvian man holds a square. You know, it fits his body, this square.
I see.
And I think your paintings fit your body.
Yes,
So you are the Vitruvian woman.
yes, but you couldn't see me when I held them up. The paintings would walk by itself.
And some of your smaller paintings are on exhibit in New York, correct? Are the 30 by 60, 30 by 50s?
I don't know.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Along with some of the drawings, right?
And your drawings
Yes.
and sketchbooks.
Right.
And the sketchbooks are really important to the creation of your process as well,
That's
right?
right.
Because you mentioned writing, but can you talk a little bit more about that writing process
Oh,
in
yes.
East Hampton?
And the sketchbooks.
Yeah, the sketchbooks are really normal.
Everybody wants me to talk, okay. So I'll say that the hatch marks almost like writing. You know, you write a letter, you come down, you go up again. So I would use the letter I, and I would practice making I, like when you go to school. When you went to school as a youngster, you studied penmanship. You had to practice writing the letters over and over again. And that's what I did in my books and on graph paper. And I would use different colors, and I would just go like first with A across, turn the paper around, go all around, continuously using different colors, and they would mesh and there would be a pattern popping out. So also with my scroll books, I used Japanese book that had folded, and I would just use the letter I continuously, going over it with different colors.
You use brushes on those?
No.
Or markers? What were-
I think they were ink. I used a rapidograph. I don't know exactly what kind of pen or implement, but I used, I liked the rapidograph pen. You know, you filled with black ink or some other color, but I used black when I would write. Sometimes the alphabet. Oh, I used to write, I had a diary, 4 books of a diary, and I would write, and I didn't want anyone to read my personal thoughts or whatever happened. And I would go over it, creating different patterns, the way I would write across it. You go this way, and then I would go this way, so you couldn't read it very well.
Could you read it later then?
I don't have them here. I'm
But
sorry.
could you read them when you?
Oh,
after you
I'd
made
like
them?
if you wanted to go back and a
Oh,
year
yes.
later to read something about the.
I read some of them.
You could read through your.
Yes, but
process.
other people can't read
Okay,
it.
yeah.
Because I know the experience, the thought and
Right.
the feeling
Yeah.
that I had at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So in a way, those,
they're personal, but yet they're art.
Right.
Yeah, so the experience became very disguised in this mesh of pattern writing.
Yeah.
and similar to how the patterns emerge and reveal themselves and then hide themselves. Also,
Yes.
these paintings here.
That's right.
That's similar.
So
experience.
also the words then would pop up and then disappear again because you try to find another word.
Yeah.
So it was difficult to read.
And Gloria, where did you and Vivien's, where do your paths cross?
I guess. Art.
Sorry.
Yeah, me too.
Well, we were both working in geometry in New York, but also I'm pretty sure that I saw, when I went to Kansas City for Assembled Propositions participation at the Art Research Center with Crisscross, I'm sure I saw Gloria's work there. So when I met her in New York, it rang,
Crisscross.
yes, so you're Gloria Klein, I've seen your work, and we became friends.
Yeah,
That was,
I saw her series of The Romance of Electricity.
Mm-hmm. It was a great series.
Right.
thank you.
Yeah,
So we became friends and.
based on our art.
Yeah, and exchange studio visits.
Yeah. So there's a real communication of ideas
Yes.
between artists at the time.
Well, it's interesting that we were showing together, how many years ago was that? 30, 40 years ago?
More.
Then we found out about it today.
Right.
More than
It
40
would have
years.
been the mid-70s.
Yeah.
Ed and I had started Assembled Prepositions in Cleveland. And Ed and I both worked.
And this is Ed Machowski?
Ed Michkowski. We both worked with geometry, but we were working three-dimensionally, doing constructed paintings. And Assembled Propositions was a group of artists who were also doing assembled paintings, or three-dimensional wall paintings. Nobody was doing sculpture. It was always on the wall, so it was paintings.
And here's an approximate quote from Michael Stevens from the Art Research Center in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
This is an approximate quote.
Okay.
If it's not pattern, it's not art.
I love that.
Which you agree with, I'm sure.
So I guess my work is art.
Yeah. Yeah. So the patterns, one thing we hadn't talked about that I really definitely wanted to mention was the relationship to textiles that your work has. And this, I think the relationship to craft is another place where you do intersect with the pattern and decoration movement.
I think the only thing it can relate to is Islamic art.
Mm-hmm.
There was an interesting show at the museum, Metropolitan Museum on Fifth Avenue in the city. And I fell in love with it because it was geometric and it was simple to the point. It was decorative, but it was magnificent.
Yeah. And Amy
And I
Gold-
bought the book
Yeah.
because I had to see it.
One thing about pattern work, it appears to be cross-culture throughout every culture.
Yes.
But it also appears to go throughout time to prehistoric times.
Yes.
Yeah. But pattern is actually one of the most, it is the most global and most geographically diverse art form or art design. And Amy Golden, who you did mention, she was an art historian at the time who kind of advocated for the pattern and decoration movement and Crisscross as well through her writings on pattern, and she was particularly interested in Islamic art and took a lot of the pattern and decoration, the people who started pattern and decoration into that realm, and I think that Islamic art had a big influence on them as well, and through these textiles, through these mosaic tiling and all of this sort of thing.
I'll have to pass.
Yeah, okay. And I think one thing that I wrote down about Golden was that she mentioned that the three distinctive characteristics of what it meant for an art to be decorative was to be flat, to be expansive, and for the subject matter to be subordinated to the overall visual experience of the work. And I think that is fairly consistent with the pattern work that you both make as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good description.
Mm-hmm.
Clark had a statement from one of the Criss-Cross catalogs, I think.
That I was going to read.
Yeah, are you going to read it?
I can read it. It kind of covers what we've already been talking about. This is not exactly a quote from Gloria, but it comes from things Gloria has said. And I wrote it up based on things you have said,
Okay.
but it's describing you. Her dense compositions of hatch marks based on numeric systems of complex patterns, balancing the oppositions of reason and passion, order and disorder. She explained each hatch mark represented an individual, a molecule, a microscopic organism, a primary unit in a permanent system, the human community and global ecosystem. No individual participant is more significant than any other. An individual participates in the system, then dies, and is replaced by another. Through the exchange between individual participants, the continuity and permanence is maintained. Now I'll add my interpretation. I interpret it as a system of consciousness.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So it is an approach at looking at the world, at looking at reality, and at looking at human existence, in societally and individually as well, the relationships between the two.
Life goes on.
Like this. Does anyone have any questions or any questions online as well?
Well, I just had a thought, and I don't know if you had any intention of this or were thinking about it all, but while you were talking about pattern And then I was thinking of somehow New Mexico art popped in my mind and all the different language patterns they have. And then I started looking at these and they just started sinking into my head and I just started feeling they could almost be New Mexico paintings in relationship to palette and the shamisa and the water and the sky and the earth and particularly that one. And then it just completely, for some reason, it
That's
just
really-
enveloped me, that idea, even though you, I'm sure, had no intention of that. But
Well, I don't know.
or maybe
I was
it just was a really interesting intersection of the native culture and
subconsciously and
yes,
deliberately. It was like a
they merged.
being there
Yes.
Yeah.
all at once in different mental states.
Right. No, I understand.
So it could come from different cultures.
Yeah. And you had
Because all
mentioned-
colors are used by all cultures in different ways.
Absolutely.
So all my paintings have different backgrounds.
She has
Or
a
different
series
colours.
of paintings from the 90s, which to me, have a very southwestern look to them.
Well, you had mentioned
Which one is that?
Well, they're the pinks and reds and whites.
Oh, yeah.
Grays and blacks, and there's quite a few of them in those colors. And to me, I just keep thinking southwest
Yeah.
when I see them.
You also had South American, like rugs and also just other sorts of like Americana in your home. You were telling me about, right?
Peruvian textile.
Yeah, Peruvian textile.
Oh, yes. I used to
Little
collect,
chunkies.
little pieces of fabrics. Some got ruined because ink spilled onto them. And, I had a friend went to one of the South American countries, brought back, I don't know, a cloth.
Right. Those what are they called? Those that you throw over
The
the.
shawl.
Serape. It's
Yeah.
like a shawl.
Yeah,
Serape.
shawl type. Yeah.
Serape out here.
Serape.
Serape.
Yes, thank you.
Different words in different places.
And someone gave me a Japanese large scarf that you use for packaging. You put
Oh,
it
yeah.
in the middle and then you tie it up.
And you had visited the Southwest before, when you were
Yeah,
younger. You visited
Mexico.
Mexico? Or Betty? You visited, where was Betty?
Oh, yes, in Colorado. Betty Woodman, she's,
Yeah.
and George Woodman's wife, who's a famous potter.
You also lived in Japan for a year as well, right?
6 months.
6
I wish
months.
it were, yeah.
Yeah.
Should have gotten married and stayed there.
Are the hash marks all the same angle? And-
Yes, it goes from writing this way, going from maybe to here down, from the upper right to the lower left. It's always going that way, as in writing.
Because it's the similar.
That's the way
Yeah,
I
because
move,
you write.
and I'm sure other people do the same thing. Maybe a left-handed person,
Yeah.
I don't know, would go this way. Maybe someone who's bidextrous would go that way. I'm sorry.
And so depending on the size of the grid, of the square of each of the grid, then maybe the angle might change. Because I'm looking there at some of the longer hatches seem to be in a bigger
Yes.
grid, so they might.
One will see the
Change the angle.
yes,
Yeah.
see the double horizontal line?
Mm-hmm.
There's lines that is 3 inches. So I made it from the upper right going down 3 inches across. Oh my gosh. Get up and show you. May I? Excuse me. Oh, look at that body.
got this
Excuse me, this one. Maybe it's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I never go in here across. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I would make a diagonal within the 4-inch square.
But on that one, the angles of the lines.
They vary a
change.
little.
Yeah,
Yeah,
more
you-
careful.
They vary, the angles vary. The longer
Yes,
ones.
this
Yeah.
one right is 1 inch to 4 within the column.
Yeah.
So I changed it a lot.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, there's a lot of variation in their work.
Yeah,
That's-
this is when I got tired of doing all this.
Yeah, both start layering on top of one another. That's the work that you said was your favorite, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The one that you'd like to live with the most?
Well, I'm not living with it anymore.
No. Do we have any other questions or?
It's a long time.
And then, so if people can't see your work here in Santa Fe, you have an opening tonight in New York City.
Oh, I'm late.
Yep. Which will be through October 7th up at David Richert Gallery, our new location up in Harlem. So I hope people can go and see it there as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
I hope so.
And some of our paperworks and journals and a little bit more process-oriented work too, which really, I think, complements the paintings very well.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
I enjoyed speaking and you were listening.
Great.
It must have been interesting. I'm sorry for being arrogant, but I'm not.
Not at all.